This is a space that centers journalists of color and marginalized voices. Everyone's welcome, and please do share the space. If you're new to IIJ events, we're so glad you're here. Please listen and be open to learning something new and being in this space with us. So I want to start by recognizing that we are all coming into this space from different places. You may be in the path of a big storm, you may be worn to the bone with election news or just general journalism industry and stress. So please take a breath, give yourself the gift of the next hour and 10 minutes to be in community with other journalists and to share, to learn, and to grow. I'm Catherine Reynolds Lewis. I'm the founder of the Institute for Independent Journalists, whose mission is the financial and emotional sustainability of freelancers of color. We're so glad that you're here with us. And for today's webinar, we have an expert moderator, my dear friend, Ellen Lee. She's a longtime freelancer who left, I'm not going to say betrayed, who is in a different season where she has a staff job. She's a senior staff writer at Wirecutter, where she reviews technology for kids. And we're so glad that she's still willing to come and be in community with us to moderate today. As a freelancer, she contributed to many, many publications, including The Atlantic, BBC, Real Simple. She wrote an amazing book of Chinese Mad Libs and Lunar New Year Mad Libs, and she has a forthcoming book on Chinese American history. Ellen, so glad to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Catherine, and thank you also to our amazing speakers that I'm going to introduce very, very quickly so that we can just jump right into things. And also just welcome everyone, and thank you for also being here. So I will just go around and introduce folks, and then they're going to tell us a little bit more about who they are and their publication. So we have on one side, we have Alan Henry, and he is the managing editor at PCMag in New York City. We also have Amanda, who works in Marketplace on NPR. Rachel is a science and technology journalist and editor at MIT Technology Review. And Troy is the science and health editor at Salon.com. So welcome all of you. Thank you so much again for being here. And I was hoping we'll just start, I think kind of alphabetically, I guess. We'll start with Alan. Can you tell me a little bit about you and also PCMag?
Hi, I'm Alan Henry. I am managing editor at PCMag, specifically working on information security. Although, it's a pretty small team, so, I have my fingers in a lot of different pots. And PCMag has been around for 40 years, and I've only been at PCMag for about a month now. I came from Wired Magazine, and where I was director of special projects there, but here at PCMag anyway, I'm interested mostly in infosec, practical uses of information technology, and practical uses of information security in people's everyday lives. And I also run our program for reviewing security products and things like that. Yeah, that's about it for me. I mean, other than that, I wrote this little book over here called Seen, Heard, and Paid, The New Work Rules for the Marginalized, which is kind of a career guide for people of marginalized identities and how you can succeed in workplaces where you're trying to use the kind of productivity tips that work for some of your privileged colleagues, but may not work the same for you. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan. Amanda, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Amanda Peacher, and I'm the senior acquisitions editor for Marketplace, which is a national show from American Public Media that airs daily. And you're probably aware that we have Marketplace in the afternoon, if you're a public radio listener, hosted by Kai Risdal. Then there's also Marketplace Morning Report, and then there's the smaller sister of the two big broadcast shows called Marketplace Tech, and I edit all of the freelance pieces that come in for all three of those broadcast shows. I was a freelancer for a long time, and so I so appreciate the struggle, and I really appreciate the talent and the breadth of ideas that come in from the freelance community that I get to work with. So I manage and edit all of the acquisitions nationwide for all three of those shows for Marketplace. And I'm really excited to hear your questions and to have a lively conversation. Thanks for having me here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amanda. Rachel, can you tell us more about MIT Technology Review and yourself?
Sure. So my title at Technology Review is commissioning editor, and that basically means that I work almost exclusively with freelance writers. I commission stories for our print magazine, which comes out every 2 months, and I commission stories for the website as well, usually just news stories. And when a story isn't right for me, often I will funnel freelance pitches to other editors of the magazine. If you're not familiar, our mission is basically to make technology understandable to everyone and to give people a sense of ownership and a sense of where things are headed. So we're basically a popular technology magazine, and you can find us on newsstands and airports now. And I am really keen on meeting people who are interested in writing narrative features, and who are interested in covering technology news that isn't necessarily consumer tech, that maybe gives readers like more insight into how things work and where things are headed. And I look forward to meeting you all and hearing your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. And Troy, can you introduce yourself too?
Hi, my name's Troy Farah. I'm the science and health editor at Salon.com. We do all the stuff that's basically a crisis in the world. There are so many things going on right now with climate change, the erosion of reproductive rights and abortion access, drug policy. I could go on. But we also have like the opportunity to do those stories that make us feel human about space and biology and evolution and all those things. So I started out, I went to journalism school in 2007 to 2011. Every single panelist or guest lecturer we had would say, get out of this industry now. It's just dying. And obviously I didn't listen. But I do think I'm one of the only people from my graduating class that actually has a career in journalism. Still, it was tough. I had to freelance for about 8 years, and that gave me the opportunity to work with so many different editors and publications, Scientific American, National Geographic, Vice, Discover Magazine, all these different places. So I learned a lot from that, and worked with a lot of bad editors, but also a lot of really great ones. And I've taken that to be like, I'm trying to be the editor that I would always want working with freelancers.
That's really great to hear. Thank you. So I'm hoping we can just talk a little bit more about what you're looking for. I'm imagining myself as a freelancer wanting to pitch your magazine or your publication, your outlet. What do you want to come across your desk? Alan, do you want to start? Like, what are you looking for?
Sure. And I used to say this at Wired too. I'm not looking for people who have like extensive, deep backgrounds in, information security or even in technology. I mean, the kinds of stories that I'm looking for are very human-centered stories about practical experiences and the way that we kind of come to understand the importance of security and data privacy in our lives. So the kinds of pitches I'm looking to see are not necessarily personal essays in that regard, but really maybe reported stories about something that happened to you, something that weaves together some human aspect with the importance of digital security. Or, many, many years ago, Matt Honan, when he was the EIC of MIT Technology Review, he had that whole problem with his iPhone, where his iPhone was hacked, and they made away with his whole life, and then came back, and he managed to kind of claw that back. That's that's a banner story, right? That was a cover story. Everybody read it at the time. But those are the kinds of stories I'm most interested in. I'm interested in what it's like for you as an individual to take security seriously in your field or in your hobby or in your life. What do you think about kids and information security? How do you teach your children to be safe on the internet? Things like that. That's what I'm looking for. And I know a lot of the other editors here at PC Magazine are looking for similar stories. Some of them are looking for straight reviews. So if you do have like kind of a well of experience testing software, they're certainly interested in that as well. But me personally, I'm more interested in human stories. I want to connect with people, mostly because so much of what PC Mag does and has done for so long is reviews and roundups and things like that. So let's get more voices, more individual voices on the page.
That's awesome. Just to follow up on that, can you talk a little bit more about like the kinds of stories? Like, are they like 1,000 word stories? Are they more first person or are they more reported? Like, what kind of?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, generally, I try to keep people around 1,000 words. Whenever I would commission a story, no matter where I've been, I've generally said 1,000 to 1,500 words for a web story, give or take what you need to tell the story. So, like, it's a guideline, not a rule. But, like, if you come back to me with like 4,000 words, we're going to be editing for a while, or I may kick it back to you and be like, hey, can we maybe make this 2 articles or something like that? But that's one thing. And also, personal experience is always good. But I find that not every publication really appreciates the beauty of the personal essay. So some publications love personal essays. I love reading personal essays. I cannot commission personal essays. However, we're not afraid to use we in, stories. Make them first person, especially even if you're like talking about something that has happened to you. Please include that personal experience as a through line in your story. And then when you pull in an expert or somebody that you're quoting, obviously you switch to, referring to that person as another person. So, but yeah.
A lot of sense. Awesome. We'll talk more about that too, but I wanted to move over to Amanda. How do you pitch Marketplace?
Yeah.
Especially as maybe even someone who might be doing print who might want to try audio.
Typically, we like people to have some audio experience before coming to Marketplace. So it's not the place to try out your audio chops, but once you've got a little bit of experience and you have a few features under your belt, then you email me to pitch any of our shows. So pitches typically come to me first, and then I need to shop them to our producers. So I am not the final call on whether or not a show takes a story. Producers will decide, okay, yeah, we've got a couple holes to fill in October, so we want 3 freelance pieces, whatever it is. But I'm your first point of contact. We have a couple different story lengths for Marketplace. So a Marketplace morning report audio feature is going to be 2 to 2.5 minutes. A Marketplace afternoon feature is going to be 3 to 3.5, sometimes 3:45. And a Marketplace tech feature will be 2 to 2.5 as well. Now, when you pitch, you don't have to say, hey, I'm thinking about this story for tech or morning. I kind of figure that out, and the shows kind of decide what they need and what might be a fit based, again, on sort of upcoming rundowns and given needs of the broadcast shows in a given season. The kind of stories that we're looking for, I don't have an exact prescription for this, but obviously Marketplace covers the economy. Our mission is to raise the economic intelligence of our listeners. And so your story should have an obvious tie to some kind of money story. I'll give you an example. Just a couple hours ago, I commissioned a story out of Wyoming. There's a new outdoor camp there that aims to bring in kids and high schoolers to woo them and their parents to either move back to Wyoming or to not leave the state because there's a lot of brain drain in that community. So that is an economic story because they're trying to keep the population robust and keep feeding those rural communities. I commissioned a story. Let's see. I commissioned a story a few weeks ago that was about local food and new grocery stores popping up in rural communities that connected producers with farmers and consumers, and sort of avoided some of the regulatory hurdles that can come with that. So it can be all kinds of things. When you think about what does a economic show want, it's not all consumer price index and what is Jay Powell going to say at the next press conference. You can also draw on your own experience. If it's okay, I'll post a couple things in the chat. I did have one example of a pitch that worked well. Is this the right time for that, Ellen?
Actually, you know what? Why don't we move on to Rachel, but we'll come back to that
That
about
sounds
your
great.
ideal. Yes. Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
Yeah. Rachel.
Thanks, Ellen. So I'll start with online. So for online, I am mainly looking for physical technology news pitches. So that's robotics, engineering, infrastructure, sensors, kind of interesting physicsy experiments with a cool technology angle, space technology, basically like anything that you can think of where technology kind of like hits the real world. And those usually, I'm looking for stories in like the 600 to 1,000 word range. And they can be from papers, they can be like developments happening at companies, like interesting things happening, upcoming, like preview stories, that kind of thing. And then for print, I'm looking for basically every story format you can imagine. We have like 3 sections in the print magazine. There's a front of book where you have where we run like news stories that are usually maybe 300 to 500 words. And those are those weird kind of print news stories that have like incredible shelf life but are still considered news. So some kind of news story that can still feel fresh like a few months out. And then we have a feature roll, which is usually about 4 features, usually centered around a theme. And then we have a back of book, which is sort of my favorite section, which is a catch-all. It's book essays, reported essays, history essays, various other kinds of things that are not necessarily related to the theme of the issue.
Cool. And we'll dig more into that as well. Troy, can you tell us more about what you're looking for at Salon?
Yeah, Salon.com, as a whole editorial vision, we really look for the intersection of power and how it intersects with news and politics, culture, food. And so for the science and health vertical, which I manage, we're definitely looking for that area of conflict. I always want to look for stories that kind of make you think twice and just kind of like, I have to read this now. Sort of a good example, Levi Stallings, a freelancer I work with, has really understood this formula well for us. He did a story recently about using AI to talk to whales, which on the surface is like, I never even thought about this. I got to read this now. But his angle on it was, should we even be doing this? There are these programs, they're dumping millions of dollars into this technology and trying to do this. Like, it's not just a theoretical thing. There are so many people doing this, but the way that we treat whales and how we could unintentionally impact and potentially destroy their culture, because whales do have culture. He brought in all these experts to the fore that are just like, maybe this isn't a good idea. And that's the sort of story that I think really does that well. We did another one recently about this woman. She had a brain injury and it damaged her ability to perceive time. So that one's not really about power as much, but it is a make me think twice kind of story that really does draw on that the powers of perception and being left behind and disability and kind of things. So Salon.com does kind of have a reputation of bias. So it sometimes feels like I'm working uphill a little bit, but I think that's just because people conflate our commentary with everything else. But I try to be very thorough about fact checking and everything, and just trying to look at things from a very fact-based perspective. So when it comes to health stories too, like, we do a lot of stuff on reproductive rights and pandemics and stuff like that. But we have staffers that are going to cover the day-to-day kind of like, this is the newest variant that's spreading around kind of thing. So for freelancers, I kind of like to take my time with them a little more, and find those angles that are more evergreen. I want people to be able to read the story 6 months from now and it's still relevant and intriguing. And I think just the best way of looking at it is those things of power. So not just covering like what is going on with COVID right now, but who is being left behind, who is not having their voice heard, that kind of thing. And, there's like long COVID patients, for example, just all kinds of examples like that.
Amazing. So it sounds like for Salon, it's like thinking about it through the lens of power. And then mostly it sounds like reported stories, right? And like how long are most of your stories or your
I would say
the
1,000 to 1,500 words is a good range. If you get to the 2,000 range, I notice people stop reading after around that. And that's unfortunate, but everyone has so many distractions these days. That's understandable. So when it gets to above that 2,000 words, like, I'm going to make sure that every single bit of information is totally necessary there. I just was working on a freelance piece and just was cutting out way too much because it wasn't relevant. And he wrote this piece about hearing loss and his personal journey on that, but then had all these information about like what to do if you need to get hearing aids. And I'm like, this, no one's shopping for hearing aids. People want to know about you. This is your personal journey. We want to follow you on this. And so I took out that information, which was, good information, but it just was distracting from the real core of the story.
Sounds good. And so some of these stories, it sounds like they're reported and first person
Yes.
that you're looking for.
I'm definitely looking for the reported stories more, but I can be, depending on how good the essay is or personal story. Yeah.
Awesome. Alan, I was hoping to jump back to you because we did hear a few of the ideal pitches, but I would
Yeah.
love to hear about your ideal, like a story that you maybe recently commissioned for PCMag.
I haven't because I've only been here about a month. So I'm still kind of building a roster of freelancers to help me out here. At Wired, however, I could talk a lot about the freelance commissioning I did at Wired because I did a lot. The technology stories that I look for over there and similarly over here are the kinds of stories that this is a Wirecutter-ism that I remember from way back when, but surprise and delight, this notion of I can take something that's kind of ordinary or something that is, just kind of you might consider it every day, but in reality, it's a surprising solution to a problem or a surprising way of looking at a problem that other people may not have thought about before. And I mean, I feel like some of that started when I was back at Lifehacker, was that, so much of Lifehacker was and is people writing about solving their own problems. And I find that a lot of tech journalism needs more of that, people solving problems. So like when I was at Wired, we used to take a lot of pitches about climate change, for example, and technology and climate change. We had a big project that I never got off the ground that I wish would happen somewhere. This kind of climate and cities project that we really, really wanted to work on, where we would talk to people in different parts of the world about the real impacts of climate change on their lives right now. And we never really got it off the ground because the focus was on sending people to fly to different places. And then I sat there and I said, well, what if we just commission freelancers who live in these places to tell us about what their lives are like and how they're changing with regard to climate change? And I mean, everybody loved that idea. I don't know if the project is off the ground, but that's a kind of story in general that excites me the most. That kind of story that you are the ideal writer to tell because you have some particular background or experience that makes your perspective interesting or unique. And I mean, infosec is a very staid, old, and often very boring field, filled with a lot of reporters who have been working on it forever, and that's fine. One of my writers is the legendary Neil Rubin King, who's been covering antivirus and malware since DOS, um, which is wild, right? But his career is so long that he doesn't see things the way that the rest of us see them. So something happens, like an example in InfoSec news recently, Kaspersky Antivirus, a company based out of Russia, has been under scrutiny for several years. And just this past year, the government just said, we're banning you entirely. You can't sell your products in the United States, et cetera, et cetera. All of their customers this week who had Kaspersky Antivirus installed suddenly got a new program called Ultra AV, and no warning, no email saying, hey, this is coming to you. So we covered it as a news hit. But what does that mean for people who don't live in the United States? Or what does that mean for somebody who really, really liked Kaspersky, which was a great product? And those are the kinds of stories that I'm interested in, is, not necessarily the news hit, which we will do in-house, but that second day pushing the conversation forward story that's like, this is an unexpected consequence of these machinations that are happening on a political level or on a national level. And this is how it impacted me and how it might impact you as well.
So you take freelance, sorry, one of the
Yeah.
things that jumped out at me was, do you take freelancers from outside the United States?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Excellent.
global writers, do please apply. I mean, you'll be paid in US dollars, so your exchange rate, you measure that. But yes.
Awesome. And I was going to jump over to Amanda too, because I think you had another ideal pitch that you wanted to share.
Oh, sure. This is actually one that came in. So I'll post it in the chat. And I think this is a pitch about a taco shop. And what I love about this is it came from a freelancer who was just like going about her world and noticed like these tacos are very cheap, these fish tacos. How does this restaurant do it? And so she sent me this pitch. And I'm not going to read it through, but you can basically see the thrust of the idea was like, how in the world in this inflation heavy environment where restaurants are having to cut costs, like how is this place still offering tacos, fish tacos for $1.19? And it got commissioned. I loved the idea. The shows loved the idea. And I'm going to paste the link to the story here in the chat as well. This is by Jill Repligal. She's a station reporter in LA. And I should say that many of the freelance pieces that come to Marketplace are from people who are already in the public radio network. So they might work at a local station and then pitch national, and that's how they get on our air. So that's the case with Jill here. And you can see this is just a story that was like she noticed something interesting in her world and then connected it to a larger economic trend. So in this case, the fish tacos are a loss leader. And if you're an economics nerd, then you know then that's like the thing that gets people into the door. And they may buy 10 fish tacos, but they might also buy 5 carnitas tacos, or they might stay for the ceviche or whatever it is. And it was just a fun story to illustrate how one restaurant is managing this difficult environment, this difficult inflation environment. So typically, I like to say we're looking for the small story that illustrates the large story, right? So tell us who you want to talk to and kind of how you're going to go about the story, and then connect it to the larger economic themes or news of the day.
That's really great advice. How about for you, Rachel? Did you have an ideal story? And I think at one point I did drop the how to pitch for MIT Technology Review also in the chat.
Oh, great. Yeah, thanks for putting that there. Uh, it really depends on what the story format is. But I can talk a little bit about features because I feel like feature pitches are a very special thing that require a lot of work and investment. One of my favorite stories of the year was for our play issue. It was a freelancer named Jonathan Rosen, who we'd worked with before. He spends half the year in Africa and half the year in Massachusetts. And he had kind of the inkling of an idea of doing something on super shoes and the impact on Kenyan distance runners. And he reached out with just like first kind of an initial like temperature check to see if this was something that we'd be interested for the issue. And then returned with just like a really solid, great pitch that kind of combined everything we're looking for in a feature, kind of like a little bit of meat about what's going on in the technology itself, and then the social impact of that technology. And he had a plan for kind of grounding it in personal stories. And I'll drop the resulting story in the chat. Oh, wait, it's already there. So I feel like that was just like a perfect feature for us. It kind of like had all of the elements that you look for. And I mean, I think this is like a place where like feature pitches like really kind of struggle, just proving to the editor that you have an approach that will draw readers in, that will carry their attention, that hits all the main points that the publication is looking for. And I think that one did it really well.
That's a great example. Thank you. And I'm going to follow up later, but I'm curious about like how long did it take for a story like that to get published? But we'll maybe jump to that in a sec. Troy, did you want to share? I know you shared a couple of stories, but did you have an ideal pitch that you want to talk about?
Really anything that's science or health related can be for our desk. I will say I don't really take food or agriculture stories. That's because we have a really great food section. Ashley Stevens does a good job. So I let her do all the food science stuff for the most part, with exceptions. So I'll just pass along pitches like that. Because we just have so many things to cover that it's sometimes overwhelming. Like we have this hurricane today and a comet that's coming. So it's like we're just figuring out which to cover today. It can be a little chaotic, but I think that's also the beauty of it. Yeah. So someone asked, like, about bias with Salon. We were one of the first web publications from the 90s, and we've gone through a lot of changes. I think a lot of our reporting, we kind of look for villains and heroes and stuff like that. Like if we're going to do something on politics or news, like we want to have characters and people in it, like a beginning, of a middle, and end of a story, and like these really strong characters. We're moving away from that a little bit more, and trying to just, be a little more straightforward, and making the readers more of like involved, and like, so, but we still do the heroes and villains thing for the most part. But how that translates to science and health without becoming biased and that kind of thing, often we'll do it through the lens of animals. They are often the victims of climate change that don't get as much attention as people losing their homes, which is not less important or anything. But a good example is Nicholas Kozloff. He's a freelancer I work with. He just kind of travels around and that kind of thing. I don't actually know where he's based. So, you can be anywhere and work for us. But he has been working on a book for about Charles Darwin, and he retraced Charles Darwin's travels through South America, and he's been writing some pitches for me. Cory Doctorow, he's a popular tech writer. I once met him at a party, and he told me that if you want to write a book, just do a blog every day. Like just write a blog every day, and after a year, you'll have a book. And he pumps out so many books. Like this is obviously his formula. And I think Nicholas Kozloff is kind of following that. So we can get into the serial rights and everything later, but like they do revert back to the writer after 90 days. So he's doing this and writing this book and following Darwin's journey. But it would be kind of boring if he was just doing it on like some of the Darwin stuff. He's connecting it to the present and talking about extinct animals and how we kind of learned about evolution and how this applies to today. One of his most recent pieces is about capybaras. They're the very large rodents. I think they're very charismatic. So they're characters, and they're moving into these neighborhoods in Buenos Aires and in Brazil, just like showing up people's golf courses and eating the people's gardens. And it's become this conflict. But humans have driven out the jaguars that were their natural predator. These are rodents. They breed like rodents. And there's all this urbanization and everything like that. So somehow these capybaras, these rodents, have become the symbol of a green resistance. But it's also just like there's all these different angles coming through it. And then one last thing I'll say about this is photos are really, really important sometimes. Levi Stallings, I talked about his whale story. He also did a story for us about sloths in Costa Rica that are being mutated from the pesticide use. It's like a strong link there. It's not entirely proven, but what really sold that story was photos of these sloths. You can kind of see how they've been mutated from the pesticide use. He didn't go there to Costa Rica, but he was able to get those photos and everything and still do this amazing feature, one of our most popular, just because he was able to, find those angles, find that formula for power and characters, and just also being able to show people what's actually happening.
Yeah. When he pitched the story, did he send you those photos right away, like, to help with his pitch?
And that's sort of something I think about in the pitch process, is because we have Getty images, but that could be really limited. Like we just did a story on indigenous health, and there was nothing on Getty images. I wanted to call them out and be like, well, what the hell? Like, this is frustrating. So we kind of just had to use like a generic image of like a CT scan or something like that, an X-ray. And that's just not how I want to illustrate things. But our story was just, I do want to think about that a lot. I think people are visual thinkers a lot, and then just being able to show them what's actually happening is like how to make journalism more impactful.
Yeah. I'm going to go backwards this time because I just want to follow up and talk more about that. Like, how does it work in terms of like pay? Like, do you pay per word, per story? And do you also pay for photos? Like, how does the financial stuff work at Salon?
We do a flat rate. We don't really pay for photos. But if the author is taking the photos, we can negotiate a higher rate. I understand that's work too. It depends though. For example, with the sloth story, like those photos were given to us from the sources, the people he talked to, so wouldn't pay for those photos.
Got it. And how much does Salon pay per story?
For my desk, it's about 300 to 400, which honestly is not as competitive as I would like it to be. We are a small independent shop, and I am trying to, uh, justify bringing up those rates. I understand that like doing science and health reporting requires a little more expertise sometimes. But yeah.
Got it. And then I'm going to go backwards. So Rachel, how much does your publication pay? And does it vary depending on the assignment and online versus print? Yeah, how does that
Yeah,
work?
so MIT Technology Review pays between, we say on the pitch guide, between $1 and $2 a word. There is no difference between online and print, but I will say that features are on the higher end of that scale and news is on the lower end of that scale.
Got it. How do you decide if it's $1 or $2?
I mean,
Sorry,
it's
word.
usually never, I mean, we definitely pay $2 a word for feature writers who have like a lot of experience. It really depends on, the story, the experience level of the writer, like kind of our confidence in like what the end result is going to be. And then yeah, so that's kind of the main thing. Shorter news stories are definitely on like the lower end of the scale, but usually we try to establish like ongoing relationships with writers. And I would say like news writers who write for us regularly are usually in the like $140, $150 or $1.40, $1.50 per word range.
Cool. How about for you, Amanda? How much does it pay at Marketplace?
So our rates start at 650 for an audio feature. And that could be for a 2 to 2.5 minute story, and then go up from there. Now, that is typically a rate that is sort of set for, it's kind of assuming that someone is reporting a story and they also work at a member station, at a local station, and then are reporting a national version of the story for us. So I'm often able to negotiate a higher rate for a truly independent journalist who is bringing us an enterprise story that is marketplace first. So it just depends a little bit on your experience, your whether or not it's marketplace first or otherwise produced elsewhere first. But 650 is the base rate and goes up from there.
Awesome. How about at PCMag, Alan?
I'll give you two first. So I'll give you PCMag and then I'll give you Wired because I know they haven't changed since I left. At PCMag, we start people around $500. Like I would probably bring people in at $500 for, around a 1,000-ish word story. I know that's like 50 cents a word, bleh, but it's a flat rate. And it goes up from there. If it requires a lot of reporting or something like that, or if it's a really deep dive, then we can go, up from there to, I think we ceiling. I don't want to say it's a ceiling because it's not really a ceiling, but you don't expect more than $1,000. And I would say at Wired, I know that their web rates start at $500. And they do have a pitch guide. I'll put a link to it in the chat. But that's for web stories. For magazine and print stories, it's a whole different process and it's a lot more money. Mostly because you'll be very heavily edited and they're expecting very specific kinds of stories and very big into narrative journalism and stuff like that. And of course it'll go in the print bag. But yeah, I think that's it.
Awesome. And I guess I'll go back into the original direction, but I was hoping, Alan, you could also talk about what the contract is at PCMag. Like,
Yeah.
is it work for hire? What kind of rights do I have? All that good stuff.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is a work for hire contract. You give up all rights to the story to I don't want to say PCMag, but the umbrella company is Ziff Davis. So when you turn it in, it is 100% ours. However, if you do reviews or things like that that require semi-regular updates, then I will come to you for those first if you want to provide them. It's not the same $500 rate. Like story updates come down to like 250, 300, something like that. But those can be regular depending on, the type of review that you're working on. But contract wise, yeah, work for hire. It does have the dreaded indemnity clause in it. So, the company is like, we have no risk or responsibility. You don't work for us. And I think, is there anything else about the contract that I should highlight? It is work for hire. The pay is in the contract as well. That says that pay range in it. Um, yeah, I think that's it. And of course,
Is there a kill fee?
what's that?
Is there a kill fee?
We can talk about a kill. So I always give kill fees. It is not institutional, like institution wide, right? Sub editors do not do kill fees. I will do a kill fee after you have filed something and we decide for whatever reason that it can't go forward or it's not going to go up or something like that. I usually try to give people at least half of the OG fee. If you've done a whole bunch of work or we've done a bunch of rounds of edits and it's out of our hands and like, let's say somebody above me cuts me out from under the knees and says your story can't go up, I'll try to give you the full fee. You did the work. It's a political decision that has nothing to do with you. And I've done that at Wired as well. So they are very familiar with kill fees. So yeah, but
That's
it's not in the contract, but so definitely negotiate that with your editor.
good to know. Thank you. How about for you, Amanda? How much does everything pay? Wait, did we just do that? Can you tell me about the contract? Sorry.
Yeah, our terms are similar to as Alan described. You sign a contract that is valid for a year at Marketplace, and then individual stories are assigned with an individual fee on a case-by-case basis. So you don't have to, turn in that paperwork every time you get an assignment, which is rather nice from my perspective. We do have that indemnity clause. We do ask reporters, to cover their bases. We do cover some travel costs if that's negotiated in advance. But it'll be like a base fee. It won't be like per mileage, your hotel rooms, etc. That you have to discuss with your editor, with your signing editor in advance. And then the other thing you asked about, Ellen, kill fees. It's so rare to get a story killed after it's assigned at Marketplace. I think I've had it happen once at Marketplace, and it was not from our end. It was because the reporter could not secure a certain source for the given story. So absolutely. And if you fully produce a story and for some reason it doesn't end up on the air for whatever reason, often I will try to get you the full rate. But again, very, very rare. Once I assign a story, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that that story gets on the air and that it is up to our standards. I'm not gonna sort of allow the circumstances where the story wouldn't end up. And frankly, we don't take stories that don't already um, don't already meet our editorial needs, or from reporters that don't have the experience to get on our shows. So you'll know that in advance.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. And then how does it work? Like if I do a story from Marketplace and I want to do like a variation of that story somewhere else?
Yeah, we own the rights to the specific story you produce for us. So it's not like you could be like, hey, NPR, do you want this for All Things Considered? Not only would that be confusing for listeners because All Things Considered and Marketplace are like back to back. Do you want to hear Amanda Peacher at 3 o'clock and then Amanda Peacher at 3:30, same story? That would be so awkward, right? But if you want to write a book about sustainable agriculture and include some of the material you reported for Marketplace, that is allowed under our contract.
Awesome. How about for you, Rachel? How do the contracts work for you?
So our contracting process, I guess, is a bit similar to marketplaces in that the writer signs a contract and it's valid for a year. But I want to say, not to boast, but I think our contract is like on the more freelancer friendly side of the spectrum. So the writer retains the copyright to the piece, and TR has basically an exclusive right to publish it for the first 6 months. So after that, you could kind of take it elsewhere and try to sell it again. And then in terms of derivative works, you are free to to sell it, but TR also retains a non-exclusive right to do the same. So there might be some, crazy scenario where you sell the rights to your work to Netflix and we sell it to Hulu, and there's a kind of weird race condition. We have a kill fee, it's 25%, but I basically only pay that if a draft comes in and it's just completely unworkable and doesn't meet our editorial standards, and it's looking like it's going to be a lot of work both on our end and on the writer's end to kind of get it into shape. If we're, somewhere along the process and it's just not kind of cohering, but the writers put in more work, the kill fee goes up. It's not in the contract, but it's kind of like on a case by case basis. I think that's pretty much everything. Yeah. Oh, indemnification. So there's no indemnification language in our contract. All we say is that the writer has to hold TR harmless against any claims, which means you can't come to us and say, like, somebody is suing me, like, please pay me $100,000 or something like that. And that you have to cooperate with us if they're like in helping us respond to any third-party claims.
Got it. And Troy, I think you already talked a little bit about it, right? Because if you write something for Salon, you can still put it into a book. But can you talk more about what else is in the contract?
Yeah, I think it's North American serial rights. The exclusive is for 90 days. And then, Salon.com has the right to, publish and republish that story forever, basically, but you can do whatever you want with it. Like I said, one freelancer is writing a book with it, and so he doesn't need permission to republish his own writing. Kill fee, I was reading the contract yesterday and it's like 25%, and I was like, that's really low. But I would probably do exactly what Rachel was saying, is like, if enough work has been put into the story, I'd do 50% or even 100%. I've only had to do a kill fee once, and I gave the writer the whole rate. So that was just a long story. But there is an indemnification clause in ours. That has also only been an issue once with the writer, but I suggest what Alan says, just raise that issue, and I will make it sure that, we can try to get that removed.
So it sounds like I think that's really great, because I feel like there's a lot of negotiating that's open and on the table, it sounds like, with all of you. I forgot to talk about the poll, so I wanted to share the results. For the first one, it was how much experience do you have? And so can we see those results? I don't see them personally. Oh, I see what beats do you cover.
Hold on. Let me see what I can do. This is what beats you cover.
So that's so interesting. So there actually are a lot of folks here with some business science technology experience. So that's awesome.
And then I can share the other one too. Let's see. I think I spoke too soon. Can I share this? No, here, view results. The other one, here we go.
Hey, how long have you been? So we have quite a range, actually, of both starting out and 20 plus years. Everyone in the spectrum is here. That's great. And I know we're getting close to time, so I know we want to get to audience questions as well. But I wanted to hear just a little bit more about what else, I feel like a lot of you have talked about working with freelancers over and over again. And I guess I'm curious about how that works for you. Do you tend to work with a lot of the same folks and you actually like assign them stories? And then what is kind of the secret to getting into that inner circle? Alan, maybe we'll just go start with you again.
Sure. I do work with a bunch of people over and over again. However, I am also, and I've been this person at every publication I've worked at, but sometimes to my own detriment. But I am a big fan of new voices. So, you do not need to be somebody who's written for my publication before, or even written for a big publication before. When I launched the Wired's Games section, we specifically wanted different voices who covered different things. Like, we didn't want to compete with the IGNs and the big gaming websites. We wanted something different, so I needed to find people who were capable of writing that. The easiest way into that inner circle, though, is to just be a collaborative writer who is willing to take edits. Because, I mean, I hate that I have to say that, but a lot of people are very precious about their words. I get it. I have been edited as much as I edit. But I do need you to be able to work with me on making sure that the story or your idea is adapted to the audience of my outlet, And it is also, my job as an editor to make sure that your words shine as brightly and in your voice as possible. So yeah, for that we got to work, we got to go back and forth. So remembering some of the changes that I've made, remembering, and you don't need to remember house style, especially like I never expect a freelancer to remember house style, although many do, because you're writing for dozens of publications. Hopefully you are. But like, just remembering some of the changes that I make, some of my little quirks and pet peeves, things like that. It makes you an easier edit the second and third and fourth times. And once we get to that point, then it's going to be easier for both of us to, hey, I have an idea. Okay, do it. I'm filing tomorrow. Okay, great. Oh, it's going up next week, stuff like that. So yeah, but I think there was something else you mentioned that I didn't get to. About being in the getting into that inner circle, but working with freelancers multiple times. Like I can, but don't be afraid to pitch anyway.
Awesome. How about for you, Amanda? Do you take a lot of new folks, or do you tend to have a network that you know you can trust?
Yeah, it's a mix. I love going out and finding new voices because it's so fun to work with new folks, and so I'm definitely excited to meet you if you've never pitched to me before, and super open to hearing your ideas. The important thing at Marketplace is less like, do you have a good story? Um, I mean, of course, that's important, but also important is, do you have a little bit of style in your writing? That makes for great audio. If you listen to our shows, then you know we aim for a very conversational tone, sometimes a little tongue in cheek, sometimes a little bit witty, if you will, because frankly, economics news can be a bit dull. So we try to liven it up. So if your first story comes in and you've got a commanding voice but can have a little fun in your writing, then it's a good chance then that will continue to commission. And we do have reporters who get a yes every single time they send a pitch. And sometimes it's a yes here and a no there for more developing audio reporters. So I just would encourage you to keep trying if you don't get a yes immediately, and really focus in on the tone in your pitch too, to make sure that it kind of matches the voice of Marketplace. Not that there's just one voice, but matches the general conversational tone that we're going for on our air.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. For you, Rachel, how does it work? Because I think you actually send out pitch calls, right, to your freelancers.
That's right. So I do want to cast the net as wide as possible. Like I want to hear from as many new voices as possible. So every couple of months when we're getting ready to start commissioning a new print issue, I sent out an email call for pitches. I used to do it over Twitter, but for various reasons, including that I just felt like it was an incomplete kind of distribution network. I transitioned to email. So if you want to get on those lists, if you go to the pitch guide, linked in the chat, there's actually a link at the top that will take you to a smart sheet form where you can add all your information, and then you will get my emails every couple of months announcing like a new topic for print. That pitch call is just for basically the features in the print magazine. So if you don't have a pitch related to that theme, you can still email me whenever you want. If you have a pitch for the website, for physical technology news, or some front of book idea or back of book idea, like my door is always open for pitches. I would say, like, like both Alan and Amanda, like I am looking for kind of a mix of new voices, but I also do go back to writers that we've worked with. And that's just because those are writers who kind of like understand what we're going after, who like consistently like pitch us stories that just kind of like naturally slot in and are just like easy yeses. And I really do like want to foster those relationships. And I think it's good for freelancers too. Like it's no fun to spend all of your time pitching the same story around to like 20 publications, working with 20 different editors, and trying to kind of like cobble together like a year's worth of income that way. I think it's much better and healthier and just kind of like sanity sustaining to be able to like work with one person over and over again. So, but I wouldn't say there's any kind of rhyme or reason. Like it's just sometimes like, like it's just the kinds of things that you want to cover, the kinds of stories you want to tell, like your kind of sweet spot for news reporting or feature reporting aligns with ours or it doesn't. And so I would also say just like don't take it personally if it takes a little while for us to accept a pitch. Like, often like there are writers that we work with regularly now who pitched us for years and actually never got anything in. And then we finally kind of like aligned and figured it out.
Yay. How about for you, Troy? It sounds like you have certain people that regularly, but are there also like how do we get into that?
Yeah, so part of the reason I wanted to become an editor is to kind of lift people up behind me, just because I'm getting older and like I'm not as focused on my own output. And so I do like working with younger and newer writers, and trying to be kind of mentorish. But I also do appreciate people that don't need to have as much guidance necessarily and just also like really understand the whole process. So it's a mix. And I do have a consistent stable of writers that like we've built a relationship of trust, and they just kind of know what I'm looking for, and also it can be really patient with me. I'm super ADHD, and so email is not my strong point, scheduling is not my strong point, but that's why I became an editor, is to kind of challenge myself on those things and then just become, and I've improved a lot. So, but patience is key, I think. So, if I don't respond to your email, don't feel bad about pestering me about it. I will try to get back to you. And I don't take that many freelance pieces per month, like between 4 to 6, just because of budget constrictions and that kind of stuff, and also time. But yeah, I think that answers the question.
My next question is kind of a mix of a question that's coming in from the Q&A and also a little bit of mine, but just how do you pitch? There is an answer that Amanda offered that she typed in, but it was like how much reporting should be in there? And another question combined with that is just like, is there anything that stands out, like even in the email subject line, is there anything that helps jump out for you? Can you talk a little bit about like kind of that nitty-gritty? You know what? Why don't I jump to Amanda? Because I think that your answer in the Q&A was really good, but if you can share that a little bit more to everyone, that would be great.
Look, I know it's hard to, I have been a freelancer, and so like it's so awkward to be like, is this a story? How much reporting do you want me to put into it before I'm actually getting paid for the thing? So I don't want you to go out and do a ton of work figuring out what is the story, who I'm going to talk to, but you should know a sense for like, okay, here's the kind of story I want to tell, and I know I need to talk to a restaurant economist or a small business owner or the owner of that miniature horse farm, whatever it is. Um, and you can lay that out in your pitch, but you don't have to go out and do the work of getting the audio, recording a scene, and doing those interviews before you bring it to us. I think having a sense for like, this is a story and I know how to tell it, but not going out and getting the interviews is a reasonable place to pitch from.
And do you want it to go to an email to you?
Oh yeah, sorry. It is going directly to me.
I think we're going to share email addresses. Um, but if you want to, you can also include it in our chat. Um, Also, I think just jumping on that with the pitch, do you want like a paragraph? Someone was asking like, do you want a paragraph? Do you want 300 words? Like what does that look like? For you, Amanda, sorry. Just following up since you were just talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Kind of the example that I laid out before with the Jill replicable story on fish tacos, just like a small paragraph that says like, here's the story and why it's interesting, and then another paragraph on how you plan to tell it. And if I haven't met you before, send a couple of links to produced audio features that you've already done so I can get a sense for your voicing and your style. And so I can also pass that along to our producers who, as I mentioned before, will make the final call. And that will help convince them that we should pick up your story.
Awesome. And I'll jump back to Alan. What makes it stand out for you for a pitch, and how detailed do you want it? How
Yeah.
long is it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too focused on how long it is. I'm going to essentially kind of say everything Amanda said, except in text. Email me directly. The best thing you can do for yourself is to say pitch in the subject line, but also think really hard about what you personally would want the headline for your story to be and make that your subject line. Because one, distilling that into your subject line tells me that you've thought through this idea enough that you know what a headline could be. Like what would you click on in order to read this story? Because I'm also going to use that as a headline for you. I mean, yeah, sure, headline editors and everybody else gets involved to change it and massage it and everything. But one thing I hate doing, and I've never luckily had to do it as an editor, is run a story with a headline that the writer hated. I hate that. And I see writers get blowback on social media and everything for, a headline that doesn't match the story. And I don't ever want to do that. I don't ever want to be that. And so I get it. I've been a writer who's had that happen to me. So anyway, make sure that subject line includes something that you think is a great headline for the story you're going to tell. Short pitches are great, maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs. Tell me who you are. Tell me your story idea. Like Amanda said, if you know what you're talking about, you don't need to do a bunch of pre-reporting. If your idea is so vague that it requires pre-reporting, I'm going to ask you to do some, but just tell me like, oh, I know I want to talk to this person or someone of this field, and give me a little short list. And then also, if you are a new writer, you don't need to include like, the story you wrote for your college newspaper or anything, unless it was like really, really like you'll love that story. But like a few clips is great. But if you don't have them, fine. Just tell me I'm a new writer. I don't have a bunch of published clips, and that prepares me from the outset to know that, okay, we may need to work with you a little bit more. But that's about it.
Okay. How about for you, Rachel? How much information should we be putting in that pitch?
Yeah, I was kind of like nodding along to everything Alan was saying, because like I feel like that headline exercise is so useful, because I think the place that pitches kind of like fall down a lot is there's not a clear top line. Like it's not clear what the takeaway of the pitch is, like what is the essence of the idea, like the one sentence that you want like readers to come away with. So I don't think pitches need to be long. I would say feature pitches generally need to be a little longer, because you're basically like the really solid ones, I feel like almost write a little lead, like you're trying to show like the editor that you can write a magazine lead, a feature lead, which is usually like a little story or something. But yeah, I mean, a pitch just needs to hit all of the main points. Like, why is this story important? Why would we write about it now? Why should readers like care? Why should your readers care about it? And then like just a little sketch of like the plan that you would have for reporting it out. And if there are any like caveats or important, like things that you will need to like look into, or kind of potential like complications to the story, like I want to see that you've thought through them, so like they come from you first, instead of me being like, well, what about this thing? Like I want to see that you've thought through them. But yeah, certainly like most important thing, like what would the headline of this piece be? And that applies to both features, where we tend to run like more generic kind of like loose kind of literary headlines, and also news.
I see Troy nodding along right now.
Yeah, I was basically going to say mostly what everyone else has already said. One thing I was always taught as a freelancer, and this is something that most people probably know, but just kind of going through it, is just to answer 3 questions with your pitch. Keep it short. The first question is why now, and why you. So, of course, the story, thinking about it with the headline and frame, and just having that in the pitch, and then the headline, so I can see that it's not just a regular email. So sick of PR people putting pitch in their subject lines. emails because it confuses me, and I'm just like, this is not a pitch. You're just trying to sell me a product or get you to talk to this source. So make it very clear what it is, and then answer what the story is in the first paragraph. And the second paragraph, answer why we should be covering this at Salon, like I've kind of already talked about. Salon, internally, we really focus on what we call user needs. We are focused on what the reader will get from our story. So there's all kinds of different ones. Take a stand with me is one that's like great. Like if there's advocacy or kind of things like that. My vertical deals a lot with stories that make me think twice or make sense, but also connect me to the universe. Those are the stories that make us feel like, oh my God, what is life even? Why are we here on this planet? And if you can kind of combine those a little bit, like it's always going to be a good formula for us. And then the last part is why you, like, just briefly summarize why you're the person to write this. And it's always helpful to kind of know what sources you intend to contact. I encourage you not to do any reporting beforehand unless it's absolutely necessary, but kind of have a conversation first. I think that's important. As an editor, I now understand why a lot of freelancers or editors get frustrated with freelancers who turn in like a 6,000 word draft that they didn't ask for or something like that. This has happened to me. And I'm just like, oh, that's why you don't do that. Like, because it becomes a bunch of work and then it's like a train, like things get kind of piled up behind. So, yeah, I think someone asked a question about documentaries. We do have video at Salon, but I don't deal with any of that. So you want to pitch the documentary team. And I think most of the stuff they do is internal.
Okay. I have another question actually, because I know I talked about this with you beforehand, but I'm curious about what you're missing or what you are looking for that you're not seeing enough of cross your desk. Like what kind of like topics aren't people pitching that you would like to see more of? And I figured I'll start with you, Troy.
Yeah, I do have staffers. I have staffers that are constantly, they have, their beats are really very thoroughly reported on. So I'm definitely looking for stories that don't fall on that. I'm ADHD, like I said, and I'll probably say it a million other times, but it's like, I hate being assigned something that I'm not interested in. And I cannot do a story like that. It's just like, I will finish it, but it will take me forever and it will just be difficult. So I really try not to assign that to stuff. And a lot of my writers who are staffers, like they've got their focus and I'm not going to assign them something that they're not going to like unless it's absolutely necessary. So for example, none of them are really interested in drug policy. Drug policy is like my bread and butter. I've always been interested in how you can take these chemicals and alter your perception, and they're connected to all these different things in society, politics, science, public health, culture, institutional racism. Everything is connected to drugs in a way. I don't get those stories very often from my staffers. So like love those kinds of stories. But just read salon.com and like see what we're not covering and that kind of thing. Like, yeah, I think that's a good summary.
Awesome. And I know we're coming close, but Catherine, can we just let everyone say what they're looking for?
Yes, and then I have another quick question, so I'm hoping to squeeze in two things.
Excellent. Because I know Rachel has specific topics that she would love to see more of too.
Yeah, so we have staff reporters covering biotechnology, AI, and climate and energy. So those areas are pretty well covered internally, but basically everything else is fair game. And I'm really trying to build up our physical technology coverage online. So I really want to see more news pitches in those areas. In the magazine, we often are looking for book essays, which are like, rounding up 3 or 4 books on a theme, and saying something about them. And also photo essays. We run like a visual heavy feature in the back of book called Field Notes, which is like a behind the scenes of like a research effort or a laboratory or something like that. And so we're always looking for pitches on those.
And by physical, you were thinking like space and
Yeah, so I think I ran through like a little list earlier, but yeah, space technology, so the intersection of space and technology, anything engineering, infrastructure, quantum computing, semiconductors, chips, supercomputing, material science, like you can basically like take your pick. Just like cut kind of excise AI out of it, and then like the rest of the physical technology world.
Awesome. How about for you, Amanda? Anything you really want to see more of?
Healthcare oriented pitches. We do not currently have a healthcare reporter on staff, and so that's a gap in our internal coverage. Welcome those ideas. And then, especially as we get into the holidays, we do a lot of retail coverage and sort of like how are people spending their money or saving their money. So I hate to say like send us consumer oriented or consumerism oriented ideas after Troy said so beautifully like send us things that make you rethink your place in the world. Marketplace is looking for more like tangible, how is this playing out in the economy kind of stories right now. So very like contained, I guess I would say, for your 2.5 or 4 minutes you would get on the radio.
Awesome. How about for you, Alan? You have staffers, but
Yeah.
freelancers should do what?
Uh, there are two things that I'm actually really, really interested in. One, I'm interested in tech policy, and specifically when it comes to cybersecurity and information security, both at the individual level and at the broader kind of, global level. I'm actually looking for someone right now who can like write a story about future threats in cybersecurity or projected legislation and how Congress is handling those kinds of things, if they are at all, right? We do not have anybody at PCMag who's really handling tech policy. They do at Wired, so that's kind of why I'm trying to bridge that gap. The other thing I'm really looking for is more security pitches that are extremely online. Like, and if you know what I mean when I say that, then you should pitch me. I mean, people who are like PCMag is so old, not people, just the institution, and so kind of has its own very professorial voice that I'm trying to shake it out of that a little bit. Talk to me about the seedy underbelly of the internet and what you learned there, or the dark forums that you're like, I don't ever want to appear here, so I learned how to delete my tweets or something like that. Send me those pitches. Send me like, I took a pitch at Wired a while ago about a guy who tweeted some really, really non-advisable things and got a polite call from the Secret Service. And he talked about his experience dealing with the Secret Service. And I'm like, give me that. That's beautiful. And it was a great story. So yeah, give me those extremely online stories, please.
That's awesome. I feel like there's such a diverse, like all sorts of kinds of stories that all of you are looking for. So thank you so much for that. And I feel like I have so many more questions. I know that everyone here has so many more questions, but I'm going to pass it to Catherine because I know she has a few.
Yes, and I'm so glad. This is why everyone should stay to the very end of our webinars, because I feel like in some ways that was the best question, since you can get an immediate pitch off. So given that so many freelancers now are struggling financially and having to take other kinds of gigs like content marketing or do copywriting communications, what conflict of interest concerns or policies would you have as an editor that you would want freelancers to disclose? And also with regard to the growth of advocacy and movement journalism, where is that line for each of your publications? If it's okay to just squeeze a little bit more time into the very quickly answer each of those questions. And I'm just going to start with alphabetical. So Alan.
Hit me one more time. What was it?
Are there conflicts of interest of
Yes.
other non-journalism clients that you would be concerned about and want to know about, or would disqualify a freelancer from working for you?
No, not really. I mean, well, yeah, I should say yes. Because if you own a security company, if you have a vested interest in the products you're writing about, if you, are a stakeholder, or shareholder, or something like that, and you're writing about a product or a service that you really recommend, please tell me, because that might disqualify you from writing about it. If you're taking paid travel, or I don't care if a company sends you a license key or a product for free, that's fine. But like if they flew you out to their headquarters in Geneva and put you up in a 5-star hotel for 4 weeks or something, I need to know about that. And that may disqualify you, but it might not. And also, if you are in a similar business, tell me that, but that might not disqualify you, right? I've gotten a lot of great pitches about technology, from people who own a business where they use that kind of technology, not because they own it, just because they have a lot of experience with it. And sometimes those are the greatest stories. Is there something else? Was there another part of that question that I didn't get?
Nope, that was good.
Okay, good.
Amanda would love to hear your take on that.
Similar, we don't really do advocacy journalism at Marketplace. It's fine to have a distinct position as you look at the story, but if you're coming at it from a very specific angle as an advocate, it's not really the place for it. And as far as conflicts of interest, you should not have a vested interest, and you should not have a stakeholder relationship with any of your sources. I think it's a lot of common sense. You should disclose that up front, and probably shouldn't pitch it to us if those relationships exist.
Great, Rachel?
I think this one's so tough because it varies so much by publication. And I think few publications have hard and fast rules. They kind of take it on a case by case basis, as we do. But yeah, similarly to PCMag, if you're going on a press junket, you're getting your hotel or airfare paid for by some entity, that would probably be an immediate disqualification. And everything else we kind of take on a case by case basis. I just ask that people, if they have any reservations or doubts, that they tell me upfront during the pitching process, when they send the pitch in, so we can just kind of get it out of the way as soon as possible. The worst thing is to get surprised, halfway through the publication process.
Yeah, I'll just echo what others have said. Basically, disclose things, ask questions if you have questions. I haven't really had much encounters with conflicts of interest. We did have one reporter that was reporting on an issue, and they were including a report that they contributed to, but we just added a disclosure saying that they reported on this and their reporting was different from the report. That's kind of being a little confusing, but we can work around conflicts of interest unless there's something that's completely we can't compromise on. I just need to be able to know what it is up front, and I definitely want to know about that as soon as possible in the whole process, because no one likes surprises.
Okay, Ellen, you can ask the question live.
I know we have kept everyone on for a really long time, and I thank you all for being here. 2 lightning round questions. If you can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Do you like getting simultaneous? Are you okay with a freelancer doing simultaneous submissions? So pitching you and other publications at the same time. Awesome. And also, do you like having one pitch per email? Anything goes for Alan. Excellent.
So efficient. Oh no. Okay, so they didn't see the thumbs up. The screen is Ellen. So the first question was simultaneous submissions are okay for Alan and Troy, but not Amanda and Rachel. And everyone's okay with, everyone would prefer one pitch per email, except Alan was like, whatever. So thank you all so much for being here. This has been an amazing webinar. Ellen, thank you so much for your graceful and efficient moderation as always. And thank you to you, our community, for being here, for the great questions and engagement. We will be following up. Please do sign up for our other webinars this fall. I'm going to share something that we have not announced yet. It's going to be announced Tuesday. We are running a level 2 business of freelancing course taught by me. So if you're interested in that, please look for the email on Tuesday or send us a note that you want to sign up ahead of time. We're also selling the conference recordings for 2023 for only $69 for 12 plus hours and all the pitch guides. So look out for that in the chat and our newsletter as well. And most of all, thank you so much, Alan Henry, Rachel Courtland, Troy Farah, Amanda Peacher, and Ellen Lee, for being here, for supporting this really tough part of our industry and a very tough time for our industry. I know that I feel rejuvenated. I want to pitch all of you, even though I know I don't have capacity. And I hope you get really great connections with our community and hope to stay in touch. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon and weekend.
Thanks for having us.